This is a video on how to test a console application. I'm going to do this particular video in C# and JavaScript. I'm not going to do Java and Python for this one. A lot of the concepts still apply. But I'm going to take apart C# and I'm going to take apart JavaScript. We're going to learn how to test a console application both from existing code and new code. We're not going to go all the way through everything. It's just how to start that test and how to basically invoke the functionality that we need to test. So that's the idea here. Let me go and close this. We'll start off with the C# code. Open up source, looking for the solution file. Let's get this running. Go and expand these and see what I've got. So really the only project here is a console app project, and that really is the main entry point. What I'm looking for in the C# world is I can start with main, especially in a console application. I want to look at main and start looking down and see what the highest level is that I can test reasonably. So looking at main, I'll just collapse the definitions here. Here's our program CS, here's our main file, and we'll see we've got quite a bit going on. So we're creating some database options, we're creating a DB context, and we're doing quite a bit of work here. So really, this is the entry point. There's not a lot I can do to test lower than this. These are actually individual pieces of it, so this is the function I need to test. I could move this out to something else, but really main is the function that I need to test here. So whether I am doing new functionality or I'm doing existing, this is going to be my entry point. Now, if this were just a one-liner or maybe just a couple of methods, I might be able to call one of those methods instead of calling into main. But in our case, we're going to call directly into main. So let's start off. We're going to create our test project. And I'll just use XUnit. We can use any one of the test projects we'd like. I'll call this acceptance tests. And let me go ahead and set up the root namespace and the assembly name for my test project. I'm just going to make these match very similarly to what we have going on in the console app, so it's easy to use our using statements and imports and types. So I've got all that going. I'm going to go ahead and disable nullable. I'm not a fan. Excellent. Let's rename our test. We'll call this. So what are we doing, right? So we need to name this based on what we're doing. In here, we're effectively extracting data, or we are, in the new case, we're viewing the patient names. So we're either extracting encrypted data or we're doing new names. And I'm going to do both. So the first one I'm going to do is for adding new functionality. So let's call this patient name extraction tests. And we'll do just an easy one. This is just going to be simple. So we'll say patient name extraction. And I'll just call this successful for now. We'll come up with a better name later on, but for now, just to let me know that I'm just trying to make this successful. All I'm really doing here, I'll change my namespace, all I'm really doing here is calling into main. So I am going to need to set up my dependencies, so I'll add a project reference to console app. And now I should be able to say program.main. The problem I'm going to run into is that main is not public. So if I navigate over to main, oh, it pulled the wrong main, wrong using. So program, yeah, actually program's not even public, is it? Exactly. So we need to change this to public. And we're going to need to change main to public as well. So we'll go ahead and just open those up. So now we'll say program.main. We'll pass that in. Now it needs arguments. So I can just say either default, or I could say null, or I could do a new empty string of arguments. All sorts of ways I can do that. But we'll go ahead and run our test now. Excellent. So this is running, and we can see what's actually happening is we're getting an error inside main. So it is executing main successfully, and it's starting to go in. So I'm going to stop here. Basically, we have figured out how to call into it. From here, what we need to do is we need to start figuring out how to deal with the encryption, how do we deal with the files, and how do we deal with the databases. But that's for different videos. So all I'm doing today is just figuring out how to call into it. So let's do the same thing, but we're going to do this was existing functionality, wasn't it? So I have figured out how to do existing functionality, which is just call into main. But for new functionality, we wanted to pass a command line argument with name only. So this is the value we want to pass in. So all I really need to do is just create an argument here in my array. Those are the args coming in. And then in my program, CS and main, I can detect for those arguments. I can say if args bracket 0 equals name only, then we'll say, I don't know, console.writeLine, new functionality. So this is a placeholder. We'll need to come back and do this later. And we'll just return. So this one actually succeeds because there's no error thrown. It is picking up the name only, and we're able to run through everything that we need to do and get the test working. So that's for existing, or that's for adding new. For existing, we'll do a new class. And this is going to be very similar. I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's going to be so similar. And we'll call this patient data. Let's call it encrypted patient data extraction tests. And here, again, all we're doing is calling in very similar. So these are almost identical. There we go. So one of these will succeed and one of these will fail. The one that is for the existing functionality is going to fail because we need to start figuring out, oh, actually it's going to fail for a different reason. So we'll say if args we'll do a null propagator. So if args not equal null, and we'll just do args length greater than 0 and oops. Yeah. So as long as there's at least one arg, then we'll do that. That'll get rid of our index out of range. There we go. Now it's airing out where we were before. So that is basically how we're going to test that. So all we're really doing in the C# world, and this is very similar for other languages, we're going to find the main method and we're going to invoke it either with an argument or not. Let's do the same thing with JavaScript. So let me go ahead and minimize this. We'll navigate back into the JavaScript folder and we'll see how to do that here. All right, so we've got everything going on here. Let's go ahead and npm I. And now I'm going to go ahead and run, I'm going to use Mocha and Chai. You're welcome to use Ava. You're welcome to use Jest. You're welcome to use any other testing framework. I'll just do Mocha and Chai. We'll create our folder, test. Let's call this, what did we say? Patient data extraction, test.js. And we'll import expect from Chai, describe, make sure we're using tabs. All right, so here's my initial setup. So this is patient data. Let's do patient, again, we're gonna do the new functionality, or let me reverse it just because it's a little simpler. We'll do encrypted patient data extraction first. Encrypted patient data extraction. All right, so from here, we need to, again, figure out where the entry point is. So we start off, you can look at your package.json. Main is going to be index.js. That's the default, but it's always worth looking into the package.json to see if somebody did something differently. So index.js is our entry point. We can see we're calling main. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to import main into our test. We need to go back and then into source and then into app for main. Now main, let's go ahead and look at definition here. Main is an async function. And looking at this, there's really, again, there's a lot of functionality in here. So really not something I can call into something more specific. So I do need to call into main. So we'll say this is an async function and we will await main. And I also need to change my test command to Mocha. All right, so let's go ahead and run our test. We should get a failure. Perfect, we do. We get a failure because it took too long. So what I can do is I can say this dot timeout. Let's do, I don't know, 30 seconds. Yes, async function. There we go. So in Mocha and Chai, this is not available unless you're doing an actual anonymous function. So if you're doing the arrow function, this does not resolve correctly. So that's just a Mocha Chai thing. All right, so we are getting the error I was expecting, which is it can't find the database server. So we did invoke main correctly. So that's good progress there. Let's go ahead and move on to the other. So this is going to be test existing. And again, we want to pass a command line argument of name only. So how are we going to do this one? So let's copy and paste again. So we'll say patient name extraction .test.js. All right, so we're going to say await main, but now we need to pass command line arguments. This is not quite as simple as passing a variable like we did in C#. In C#, the command line arguments are packaged for us automatically. In JavaScript, on the other hand, that's done outside of our code, and it's not something that we have direct access to, but there is a way to get through that. So the way we would typically get arguments in the JavaScript land is through the process class. We would say process.argv, and then that would give us, that's an array, that would give us the arguments for which we're looking. So what we're going to do here in our patient name extraction is we're going to set that up. So we'll say process.argv, and we're going to push name only. So now we have the name only argument. We'll call into main. Now what we want that to do is do something different. So what we'll do is say if process, that I like that, then we will do that. Let's just return for now. So we'll exit out of the function just to make it short-circuited. Again, this should pass. Let's go and run our test. We should get 1 success, 1 pass if I did everything right. 1 failing, 1 passing. And so now again, we figured out on the console application how to test with command line arguments, both in C# and JavaScript. These patterns are going to apply to Python and Java as well. You may need to do a little research to figure out how you deal with the command line arguments on those languages. Java is actually going to be very similar to C#. Python is going to be somewhere in the middle of JavaScript and C#. But that's the idea. So a little internet search to help you out. But now that we've got that, now we can start looking at the specific errors that are happening to try to figure out how do we mock our databases, how do we mock our services, how do we set up encryption and decryption, all of those other things that I'm going to cover in other videos.